Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us in another round of AGC webinars. My name is Suzana Ayeti and I'm the AGC Portfolio Marketing Manager at PCB, and I will be your organizer for today. Today's topic is how climate change is shaping the future of business. Our presenter is Mr. Eric Keogh, who is a global specialist in environmental services and financial markets, and he will demonstrate the true costs of CO2 and air pollution to business and society. You will learn the benefits of reducing these emissions in operational expenses and economic terms, including social and environmental impacts and benefits for marketing, branding, and corporate social responsibility. Remember that you will have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenter by typing your questions into the question pane of the control panel. Now we will turn the time over to our presenter. Mr. Eric, you may start the presentation.
Thank you very much, Susanna. Good afternoon from sunny but cold London. Okay, so how does climate change shape the future of business? I'd like to run through an introduction of the overview of the webinar today. We'll run through an overview of what CO2 and SLCPs are, that's short-lived climate pollutants, as well as air pollutants. We'll run through the cost of CO2 and air pollution, business opportunities, operational cost reductions and co-benefits and investment opportunities, and at the end we'll run through a summary. We'll have roughly about 10 minutes after the presentation to run through questions and answers. Anything that can't be answered, just please send in an email and we'll reply to those as soon as possible. Okay. Air pollution is currently a global pandemic killer. Currently, data is suggesting that somewhere in the region of 7 million people die per year globally. Now that's the ones that die, that doesn't include the ones who are incur illnesses and various other consequential results of air pollution. Along with air pollution, climate change is increasingly impacting people, the environment and the global economy. Regulators, financiers, international organisations, UNFCCC are all calling for action to tackle both. The triple line for both governments and businesses is that it benefits people and the environment and your bottom line. So, what are CO2, short-lived climate pollutants and air pollutants? What's the difference? As we all know, CO2 is a molecule. It is made up of 3 atoms that are joined covalently throughout a combustion process in an attempt to oxidize current fossil fuels. It has multiple adverse effects on global climate change. There are recent reports out of Harvard confirming also it has cognitive learning disabilities attached to exposure. The levels in the atmosphere are currently at critical levels and the highest seen for many thousands of years. The mitigation actions are currently being ratified by multiple countries and governments at the UN COP meeting in Marrakesh, which basically make it a voluntary agreement, although there are mandatory commitments to actually implement their commitments. So short-lived climate pollutants are precursors to CO2. They are not yet fully oxidized to CO2. They have also, in addition to CO2, significant global warming potentials, especially black carbon. Black carbon, as confirmed by the World Bank in 2014, has some 3,200 times the global warming potential of CO2, although it is only suspended in the atmosphere for a shorter period. Methane and other pollutants also have significant global warming potentials, if not also other pollutants including NO and NO2 are precursors to a multiple transient set of air pollution and climate change problems. A recent report by IGSD in 2013 confirmed that short-lived climate pollutants account for some 45% of global warming. Now, that is significant. If the global warming effects of short-lived climate pollutants are not factored into climate change commitments, then it's very unlikely that CO2 reduction on its own is likely to achieve the 1.5 degrees target. Currently, some 87% of the world's population live in areas that exceed World Health Organization air quality guidelines. The pollutants include NOx, particulate matter, nanoparticles, carbon monoxide, various other pollutants, many of which are damaging to health in various different ways. They all have significant health effects as, for example, cancer, COPD, as well as neural development. They don't have just negative impacts on the environment, they have significant impacts on health. Here's a quick summary from a recent UNICEF report as to where the typical pollutants come from in an average society. Okay, the OECD has done a summary analysis. If business as usual continues into 2050-2060. As we can see, all pollutants are on a trajectory for an increase, so hence the need for mitigation actions now. So, what are the real costs of climate change and air pollution? What you need to remember is that CO2 is not just a carbon certificate. It doesn't have just a value of current carbon prices on the markets. It has multiple other cost consequences, including social cost of carbon. So to put this in some form of perspective for business costs and operational costs in the transport sector, 1 tonne of transport CO2 is going to cost. It costs 379 litres of diesel. That's how many litres of diesel need to be oxidised to make 1 tonne of CO2. The net cost for that is typically in the United Kingdom at the right moment in the region of £450 per 1 tonne of CO2. It's similar across most of European countries. Now, what you need to think about is what duty and what tax revenue each and every country respectively earns from that 1 tonne of CO2, and balance that in respect of the actual economic cost damages of 1 tonne of CO2. The cost exposure to air pollution, according to, I think this was a World Bank report, was somewhere in the region of $5.11 trillion in 2013 in welfare losses alone. This amounted to 7.5% of GDP in some regions. In some countries we know that that is significantly higher. The cost of premature deaths caused by air pollution alone in the US are somewhere in the region of $225 billion per year. That is a cost, an economic cost that countries, taxpayers cannot bear. Without robust action, these costs obviously will rise, causing severe economic, environmental and welfare losses. As we can see from this recent World Bank report, the welfare losses are continuing and increasing with a direct correlation to increased air pollution, both inside and outside of homes. So what does air pollution actually cost in London? This is an extract from the DEFRA website for economic cost damages for particulate matter and NOx costs in central London. Please note that these are 1 tonne equivalent of particulate matter and NOx. They are not directly correlated with CO2 emissions, as it will depend totally upon combustion and oxidation efficiency within each respective engine. As we can see, particulate matter have the highest costs. Transport Central London upper estimate is some £301,000 per 1 tonne of particulate matter. NOx costs, which includes NO and NO2, have a significant cost as well, and also these costs were what the EPA estimated and used as methodology for the fines for Volkswagen. Okay, the cost of cheating, the cost of polluting. Volkswagen on its own incurred significant liabilities just from one pollutant, NO and NO2, NOx. It had a significant impact on the US economy and US lives. So just these were a few extracts from a number of the legal cases that were undertaken within the USA. What you need to do is also have a think about these future costs and future potential liabilities on investments and your company and your organisation. Ask the same questions that investors and fund managers are currently asking, as in, would you invest in this company? The potential liabilities don't just stop there. As we're aware, there are various different court cases undertaken around the world. Many of these are only just receiving significant attention, even although they've been continuing for somewhere in the region of 10 years. What you need to do is look at your business assets, your business models, how you operate your business, and look at potentially stranded assets in the light of what is going on globally. Never mind the public opinion and CSR images that your company can portray. There's multiple consequential losses that are also accumulating within economies. One of which is what the insurance companies are significantly looking and underwriting the risks associated to climate change and air pollution within their policy underwriting and premium terms. Okay, so what's the opportunities for your business? A circular economy is also a circular business. If you reduce CO2, if you reduce air pollution, you are going to reduce energy reduction, and air pollution, by the way, is actually wasted energy, and also improve energy efficiency. This is going to improve your net profit, your productivity, it will enhance branding and public image, and investors are typically looking now at one of the major elements of criteria for a company or corporation to invest in, and that is better governance. If you are looking after your bottom line on energy expenditure and emissions and potential liabilities from them, it improves your investability. Okay, so when we talk about co-benefits, we talk about co-benefits of reducing not just CO2, also air pollution. The reduced exposure to potential liabilities and stranded assets and Volkswagen, as identified, can have a significant potential liability for businesses that continue to burn fossil fuels and emit air pollutants. There is also a significant importance of using, as evidenced with Dieselgate, real-world emissions. Laboratory test emission standards and emissions modelled based upon those are inaccurate and could cause significant potential liabilities if your mitigation actions are not planned and based around real-world emissions. Okay, so if you're an investor, you're looking for investment opportunities, and an increasing element of investors' criteria is that their investments have an impact on social, environmental and ethical investments. They want to see that their money is working to ensure that there is going to be a reduction in emissions in the future. These investments don't just provide a legacy, they also provide an excellent return on investment and also income yields, and it is a significant growth market. There are multiple investment opportunities, and many countries and governments are using green bonds, which can be certified and verified, for an investment instrument in which you can fund environmentally safe and sound projects. So companies and corporations, governments, cities can also invest in these. There are also multiple co-benefits, including carbon offsets, to be combined with these investments. So we don't have to use the established markets as in the EU ETS. You can actually certify your emission reductions independently and use multiple market mechanisms from around the world. As a brief summary, reducing CO2 isn't just reducing a gas, isn't just reducing climate change, it's reducing your operational expenses. It is money. Capital expenditure for mitigation actions, technologies, revising your strategic planning for your company's future can be funded from multiple resources, including climate bonds and offset with the emission reductions. Typically, there is an excellent return on investment for companies and corporations investing in greening their operations. I'd like to summarise to say that there is such a thing as smoke without fire. It's called air pollution. Reducing the emissions of greenhouse gases and air pollutants makes sense for you, your business, health and future of the planet. I'd like to hand you back to Susanna now and take any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Eric, for this presentation. Before we continue with the questions, we want to inform you that PCB provides training and certification services for ISO 40001 environmental management system, such as introduction, foundation, lead implementer and lead auditor courses, and of course the transition course to ISO 40001-2015. This training will help your organization reduce any negative environmental impacts and at the same time will help you grow your business. The PCB certificate will demonstrate your dedication in implementing and managing these processes and frameworks, and most importantly, you will be recognized worldwide. For more information, please visit our website pcb.com/training. Now back to our presenter. Mr. Eric, the first question is, how do we convince big companies to start caring about the environment?
Okay, I think most of the large companies are already implementing mitigation actions and looking at the costs involved, both capital expenditure and operational expenditure to do this. As more and more companies look at innovative and new technologies and increase the scale and replicability of the manufacturing of these, the cost of these technologies is also falling. So some of them are still sitting on fences waiting for that sort of price barrier, but most of the renowned sensible companies that are operating have a significant eye on reducing their emissions.
Thank you. The next question is, what industry is most likely to be affected by climate change?
I would say there's going to be multiple impacts related. Obviously, the first industry is going to be fossil fuels, typically coal, because it is one of the highest polluting fossil fuel sources at the moment. It will obviously inevitably have an impact on fuel and oil and gas companies, but I think they've established, and it's generally accepted now, that the writing is on the wall and that every single country, every single industry is on a road to zero emissions. And the sooner they can achieve it, they can also achieve operational savings.
Okay, thank you. The next question is there any research about air pollution costs in developing countries?
There is very little, actually. There was a recent report on a number of issues in Africa, but it's only just recently, as in over the last sort of 3 years, where the real economic costs and damages have been established in developed countries. There is multiple methodologies how you can actually use this data and information to work out a similar sort of cost and expenditure ratio for developing countries, but it's still relatively a relatively new science, and there are multiple methodologies to do this, some of which are subjective.
In terms of environmental reporting, are there many systems in place for companies to carry it out, or do companies have to carry it out themselves?
There are various different sort of major initiatives underway in different countries. For example, the United Kingdom has mandated for the largest companies in a country, or in the United Kingdom, to implement a energy efficiency report. The idea of that report is to give them a baseline and a set of indicators to work from, so that they can actually identify the sort of best cost-saving initiatives that they can implement. Each and every company should be looking at their bottom line and expenditure, respectively. In any case, it's part of a normal sort of, business operation.
Thank you. The next question is, you mentioned the coal and mining industry. Should they be closed?
With the current operation and business as usual scenario, yes. However, there are multiple technologies available that have been robustly tested, tried, certified over many years, which will still allow companies to burn fossil fuels. The thing that it does do is it stops the pollution and CO2 going into the atmosphere. CO2 is a typical waste product, the same as a plastic bottle, the same as a coffee cup that you would throw in the bin. It can be recycled and turned back into energy. And there are many companies around the world now implementing some very innovative technologies attached to recycling CO2 and air pollution into energy.
Thank you. How much CO2 can potentially be released when a volcano erupts, and how does this compare to human generating CO2?
Good question. Nobody has asked me that one before. Obviously, we've got some historical data of CO2 throughout the last sort of few thousand years. And we've got historical records where we can compare volcanic CO2 and emissions from volcanoes versus man-made CO2. There is, I think it's well established throughout science that the anthropogenic sort of damage has been escalated significantly in the last 100 years. And if we compare that historically to volcano sort of eruptions and CO2 in the ambient atmosphere, that gives us a pointer to the fact that it is caused by man-made pollution, full stop. So volcanoes are still going to erupt, but you can't stop that. You can stop man-made pollution and its effects.
Thank you. And the last question for today is, can you turn climate change into business opportunity, and how?
Oh, absolutely. The business opportunities are significant. If you think about just the value of economic cost damages for a country, that is an operational expense of burning fossil fuels. That operational expense can be significantly reduced. The cost of mortality, morbidity and environmental damage can be significantly reduced. And each and every action has a multiple return on investment for governments and businesses. So it makes common sense.
Mr. Keogh, thank you very much once again for this presentation. Unfortunately, we are out of time, so all of the questions will be answered via email. I would also like to thank all the attendees for joining us today. Once you leave the webinar, you will receive a survey in the presentation, and we would appreciate if you could complete that and provide your feedback. On behalf of PCB and our presenter, thank you for joining us and have a great weekend.
Okay, thank you, Susanna.